So today we're going to be celebrating those wins and the progress that we've made. And we also know there's still a lot of work to be done, right? Yes. But before we dive into our show, I wanted to ask you, have you seen that new reality TV show where a husband and wife team remodel houses to make them more accessible? And it's like amazing. I mean, they do everything from putting new, metal roofs on to widening doors, making bathrooms and kitchens accessible. And they do this all by themselves. If they don't know how to do it, they watch a YouTube video. Well, this really isn't a reality TV show, but it does describe some of our guests' life. Because we are lucky today, we have Kathie Snow on with us. And besides being a, kind of major remodeler, she also is an international speaker. Many of you, I think, have heard Kathie speak before. And she's the author of a book called Disability is Natural. And she is joining us today. And we're going to be talking about what the status quo is. What kinds of progress have we really made in the past 40 to 60 years? And where do we still need to work? And where do we need to go? And specifically, what you can do as a parent or as a teacher to promote that progress and really make systemic change that will make a difference for all our kids. So I am just thrilled. Kathie and I have known each other for several decades. We used to live about a mile apart in Woodland Park, Colorado. And my family moved out to Idaho to be with grandkids. And shortly after that, Kathie moved back to Texas. So I know we have lots of Texas viewers that join us. So welcome to you if you are watching us live or on the replay. Make sure you know that you can always type in your questions or comments and we'll respond to those. But Kathie, I want to say I am so excited that you're back on our show again. So welcome.
Well, thank you, Ms. Charmaine. I am delighted to be here. And yes, we were a mile apart for a while, and now we're just as close. We're just not physically close anymore. So technology is wonderful until it's not. But, for now it is wonderful. So thank you for having me on, and welcome to all of your guests and at the live show and also the replay, like you said.
So, Kathie, I know you have been a disability activist for a number of years, right? Yeah. And you have learned from people like Ed Roberts, who just would have had his birthday, right? And he was, I know, an instrumental disability activist that taught you many lessons. So maybe we can just first kind of give a shout out to Ed Roberts and some of the things that you had learned from him.
Well, absolutely. Ed Roberts had a huge impact on my life. He's considered the father of the independent living movement. And of course, when he started that, excuse me, back in the late 60s, early 70s, if he started it today, he'd probably put a different name on it because people get confused with the whole independent living movement with thinking that it's a place where older people live, and it's like, so he might even call it the interdependent living movement because actually none of us are independent. We're all interdependent. But the whole independent living movement, based on his life experience, he wanted to go to college. He, had polio as a child, and he ended up, literally living in an iron lung and later using a power wheelchair with a portable ventilator attached to it. So he was, had a breathing tube and a power chair that he could drive with. He only could move 2 fingers. The only part of his body he could move were 2 fingers on his left hand. But he wanted to go to college, and the people at the University of California, Berkeley, told him, no, you need to go to a nursing home, And he's like, I don't want to live in a nursing home. I want to go to college and, be like anybody else. And so that's what he meant by independent living, that he admitted he could do hardly anything for himself. He could not feed himself. He literally could only move these 2 fingers. But he was totally in control of his life because he made his own choices, made his own decisions. And I would have to say, Charmaine, in thinking about the the whole concept of this, what do I just love the vest you held up, that, work zone. Yeah, we got a lot of work to do. That, excuse me, I got Kermit the Frog in my throat. That for all the progress we've made, I would have to say that what Ed talked about, back in when I met him in 1990, God, that's like forever ago, 1990. Probably some of your listeners might not have even been born in 1990. But what Ed talked about in 1990 was that attitudes are the greatest barriers facing people with disabilities, children and adults and their families. And of course, sometimes that's the attitudes of parents towards their own children. And so it's about our attitudes. I mean, not just society's attitudes, but ours. And so in thinking about the status quo and what needs to change is that, one of the concerns that I have is still the whole paradigm of disability that we have in our country. And Charmaine, you know me, I can go on and on. So you
no, you're doing good.
Feel free to interrupt me and say, okay, Kathie, I have a question for you, or if any of your, viewers, listeners. But the whole paradigm of disability, that we are still operating from the paradigm of disability as the medical model. That let's look at, what's wrong with this kid. Nobody says it in those words, but that's essentially what we're doing. And then we're going to identify what's wrong with him, or, ergo the diagnosis. Therefore, we have to fix the child. And we try to fix the child through early intervention, and special ed preschools and special education. And of course, all the therapies, OT, PT, speech, ABA, there's the horticulture therapy, behavior therapy, art therapy, music therapy, he therapies kids out the wazoo. And in contrast to other countries, and I have spoken internationally, but mostly I've stayed in the United States and some in Canada, but I get emails on our website from people all around the world. And of course, the United States has made a lot more progress. I mean, we're the first country to have the Americans with Disabilities Act, that no other country has that as comprehensive as ours. Having said that, other countries are making greater progress in the whole issue of attitudes. So I got an email, it's been a couple of years ago now, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, from New Zealand, and they had visited my website, and these were professionals in the disability field, and they said, oh, we love what you're doing. That's what we're doing. And of course, I think they thought that because I had this stuff on my website that the United States was doing this. I was like, no, here, there's a lot of people think that I'm from another planet. But what they were talking about in their email to me was that they now, through their government programs and everything, they view disability through the social model, not the medical model. And what they mean by that is that they don't look at, say, a young child with a disability and say, oh, what's wrong with them? We got to do therapy to fix them. They'll say, oh, kid with cerebral palsy is not walking. We'll get this little 2-year-old child in a power wheelchair. A child with Down syndrome or autism who's not yet talking, you're going to get that kid at age 2 or younger a communication device. So they look at what is in the environment. So you could call it the social model or the environmental model. What is in the environment that needs to be changed? So that we don't need to change the child. We got to change the environment. And so that's when I think about the status quo, that's what's, we're still existing in this old way of thinking, this medical model that really is from the institutional era that started in the 1800s. We're still operating from that model. We don't put people in institutions when they're babies anymore like we used to, but we're still operating from that paradigm in the sense of how services are delivered, how special education is designed, how we as parents are told, oh, you got to start, taking your baby to therapy as soon as they're diagnosed, which is, and I tell parents, I bought into that. I mean, that was my thinking. You don't know what you don't know. And so, Charmaine, my history, because we've known each other so long, but, when Benjamin was little, I mean, I wanted more therapy. I mean, that's what most of us, if a little bit of therapy is good, then more is better. And so I believed in all that stuff until I got to know adults with disabilities who helped me realize, no, walking is not the most important thing in the world, but might need a power wheelchair. Talking is not the most important thing in the world. Why are we going to, essentially sometimes torture kids through years and years of therapy that, one doctor that I didn't like most of the doctors my son had. I liked one because he was honest with me, and I was still in that model. Oh, Benjamin's got to walk. Benjamin's got to walk. Benjamin's got to walk. He has cerebral palsy, and that's what all the therapists were working on. And I asked this one doctor, that he's an orthopedic guy, and he said something that started changing my life. And he said, I said, is Benjamin ever going to walk? You think he's ever going to walk? And he looked at me and said, I don't know. And he says, nobody knows. And he said, you know what, Kathie? If Benjamin can walk, he will. And if he can't, he won't. And I started memorizing that. It's like, if Benjamin can do X, he will. If he can't, he won't, you know? Like I realized I'm never going to be a ballerina. I mean, you can send me to ballerina therapy all my life, and I am not going to ever be a ballerina. Okay. So, but the point is that last thing I'll say, and we'll go back to you, but this whole attitudinal thing is what undergirds the lack of progress we've made in early intervention, in all the therapies, in special ed preschools, in special education, in adult services. That whole model, that whole medical model undergirds where people with disabilities are continue to be made helpless and dependent on the system. And this ultimately is, and I've written several articles on this, it's the business. It's the disability business. And people with disabilities, kids and adults, are the raw material of a business that keeps millions of people employed while adults with disabilities are not employed. And that just, I mean, I just gave myself goosebumps because it makes me so angry. I am just so angry about that. But okay, for a second. I'll take a breath.
No, and I think that is true. And it's, I guess what's so frustrating to me is that we have had people writing about, changing from a medical model to, like you said, a more environmental or social model for a number of years. And it's, I don't know, it's like so frustrating to see the slow pace of change. One of the things that I really liked in one of your articles, and I should remind people, so if you'd like to get the show notes that we have, where I summarize our show and give you extra resources, and I'm going to be giving you some resources that Kathie has. But Kathie, one of the articles that you wrote that it really resonated with me was talking about the difference between the civil rights movement and the disability rights movement. I mean, we often think of the similarities, but talk a little bit about why there are distinct differences between civil rights and disability rights.
Well, I think the article you're talking about was the one about why don't we mandate the same civil rights for people with disabilities as for people of color or whatever during the civil rights. But I mean, one of the comparisons in that article was that when the civil rights movement happened and the whole thing was employment and voting rights, and those were two distinct things. But what the federal government said is you cannot discriminate on the basis of person's race. And states, of course, said, "Oh, we got states' rights. You federal government, you can't tell us what to do." And the federal government says, "Yeah, we are going to tell you what to do." And there was nothing about funding or money or anything like that. It's like you cannot do this, and if we have to, and they did, we will send the National Guard in, to enforce this. And so, we should look at the parallels. And of course, one of the jokes is, and it's probably an old joke by now, but probably younger people haven't heard it. But in the civil rights movement, people were talking about, we are not going to sit on the back of the bus. We want to sit in front of the bus. And the joke of people is, we just want to get on the bus. We can't even get on the bus. And so what happened though we start with the Rehab Act in 1973, Section 504 of the Rehab Act, which was the first federal legislation regarding disabilities. Again, the first federal legislation. And what the Section 504 says is, if you receive federal funds, which I mean, way back then, and even from the beginning of the government, in some ways, entities receive federal funds. I mean, if you people that get Medicaid or Medicare, the point is that they go in the hospital, it's the federal government who is paying Medicare and Medicare. So Medicaid and Medicare. So if you're in the hospital and you have that, then the federal government is giving that hospital funds. If you're a city government, excuse me, or a state government, you are getting, federal highway dollars, or, I mean, the point is that, colleges, universities, I mean, just, so many, state level government, counties, whatever, get federal funds. So the Section 504 of the Rehab Act said, if you as an entity receive federal funds, you cannot discriminate on the basis of disability. Okay, that's great. I mean, and that was progress in certain areas. And of course, that impacts schools. That's why some folks know that, some kids don't have an IEP under special ed law, they have a 504 plan, okay, that requires accommodation and that kind of stuff. Well, then we, move forward. Okay, so that was in 1973. Then 1975, we had special ed law. Well, here's one of the dilemmas, that education is not in the Constitution. So therefore, the federal government really has nothing to say about education. That's why there's a State Department of Education in Texas, and there's one in Colorado, and a different one in Idaho, where you are, and one in California, whatever. And so in order to impact the education of students with disabilities, parents in the 1970s were filing all these lawsuits against their state education departments. And the parents were winning all of these. But what, say, a lawsuit in Texas only applied to Texas, whereas a lawsuit in California only applied to California, blah, blah, blah. So at that time, the federal government said, okay, we're gonna address this. And so to do that, again, because it's not in the Constitution, if it's not in the Constitution, the only thing our federal government can do is to say, we will give you some money, states, if you will do this. We will give you money if you do this. So they proposed special ed law, and they wrote all the regulations. And they said, okay, states, state departments of education, if you follow these laws, we will give you money to educate these kids. Okay, well, that sounds okay, but okay, now we're holding children with disabilities hostage, essentially, to funding dollars, okay? And so one of the concerns that I have is that we as parents, we use special education as permission for our children to get a public education. Well, if you go and say, look at the laws in the state of Texas or the laws in the state of Idaho, if you read the education laws, I mean, just the general education laws, nowhere in there does it say children without disabilities. It just says children or students. So it's like, why don't we just use our own existing state laws to say, no, my kid is going to go to this school because that's where the boundaries are for our school district or blah, 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 whatever. Instead, we say, no, we have to use special education. Well, that's what the schools try to tell us. But we could say, we don't want special ed services. Now, there might be some schools that say, oh, no, your child has to get it. Your child must have special education. Well, we can fight that. I don't like the word fight because then that means winners and losers. But we could say, no, you know what, we are willing to give up, PT and OT and speech, or we're willing to give up some accommodations. I will work with the classroom teacher, or say we're just going to do a 504 plan for accommodations and stuff, as opposed to, because I mean, parents will fight tooth and nail and go to World War III to get 30 minutes of therapy a week. And it's like, for what? I mean, what good is that going to do in the big scheme of things? And so that's where things begin to diverge. So then comes the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990, and my son at the time was 3 years old. I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. This is just fantastic. And I thought, man, this is going to change everything. Well, okay, despite the fact that 1973 we have the Rehab Act, 1975 we have special ed law, 1990 we have the Americans with Disabilities Act, so comprehensive. The ADA doesn't say anything about money. Okay, it doesn't say if you get money like the other ones. It has no dollars attached to it like special ed law, but it has a lot of outs. So the outs are, if it's reasonable, if it's this. So businesses have all kinds of outs. So we don't have in civil rights law, we don't have a thing that says, oh no, if you don't want to hire a black person, you don't have to or even we can get into religion. We don't. So it's like people with disabilities are still, and I'm happy for all the social progress that has been made for people of color, for women, obviously, for people LGBTQ group. I'm happy for all that. People with disabilities, we're still at the bottom of the heap when it comes to, we don't have the visibility. The visibility we do have is based on pity. Let's go out for a telethon or for a walkathon or what, those poor kids, let's raise money for those poor kids. It's like, that is not going to get us the equality we need. That's not going to get us where we want. And that's the difference. We don't have, we have groups like the NAACP and that kind of stuff. They're in there to really change things. They don't have telethons or walkathons or benefits, So we keep focusing on, this goes back to the whole beginning of attitudes. Anytime we have any kind of events like that, they focus on the differences. Let's have a group for kids with Down syndrome. Let's have their buddy walk. I know I aggravate a lot of parents. There's some parents listening right now that want to throw a rock at their screen, and I understand that. But that is not going to get us the progress we need, because your son dealing with Down syndrome, my son being with cerebral palsy, Benjamin, Dylan are more like young people without disabilities than they are different. And I give myself goosebumps again. It's like, until we stop focusing on the differences, we keep focusing on the differences, with the Walker charity event or whatever. Charity? We don't want charity. We don't want special. We want equality. I mean, when are we going to say, our family does not want to be special. We want to be ordinary and plain and just go do what everybody else wants to do. We don't want to be treated special. That's like basically being demeaned.
Well, and that's the thing. And I, one of the other points that I think is really important is, and I talk about this, that we need to stop separating ourselves as parents and families and kids.
Right.
And when we maintain this special interest group kind of mentality, that works against us.
Absolutely.
And that, we need to widen our circle of allies.
Yes.
We need to be concerned about other issues in our school district besides special education issues, that we need to look at. This is education for everyone.
Right.
And how are we going to change? So that's one of the other things, the other point that I think you made in one of your articles, and I'll share that in the show notes with people. So make sure if you want the show notes that you type that in. But the difference between the civil rights movement, the women's movement, and other, right kinds of movements, is that they found other Americans, other people in our culture that rallied with them. And that is different than what we see with disability rights movements. So if you want to speak to that for a minute.
Well, yeah. We have parents who, are still in the 21st century starting special ed PTAs. It's like, no, you go be the president of your own. You as a parent child, go become president of the PTA. Not because you're going to make disability issues a focus. I mean, that's what you and I used to talk about when we were both in Colorado, that inclusive education is about education, period. Okay? And then I realized years ago, we're not going to have significant changes in special education until we have significant changes in general education, the regular ed. And so the whole thing with, the special groups and stuff, and I think I know which article you're talking about. It was one that I wrote recently. I mean, I've written so many. I'm not saying to brag, because I forget. Oh, I did write an article about it. Because sometimes it's like, and just for your audience to know, the articles I write, I am not smart enough to have figured out hardly any of this by myself. Okay, I am a student of adults with disabilities who have taught me so much. Now my son's an adult, but they've taught me. I'm a student of you, Charmaine, of parents I meet when I go do presentations face to face, and they come up and tell me a story. It's like, oh, if this parent is facing that, I'm going to learn from that, and I'm going to write an article about that, because it means other people are facing it. But what I saw, and now it's like time is passing so fast in the Trump era. I don't even want to say that, but it's like we can't keep track of everything. But so it was during the whole thing with getting rid of Obamacare and Medicaid reform and all that, in this latest thing of Congress. A year ago now, that you saw all these people with disabilities in the halls of Congress protesting of how they were going to cut stuff. And that's another huge issue for children and adults with disabilities is healthcare. Benjamin needs a new power wheelchair about every 5 years. It costs about $50,000. That's a lot of money. We couldn't afford it. I guess I could go have a bake sale and see if I could raise the money to buy him a new wheelchair if I had to, but at the same time, it's like a lot less money. Say if you have cancer. And I'm not trying to equate the two. I'm just saying, every 5 years, give Benjamin, let insurance pay. Well, again, what you talked about in saying the Women's March, in 2017, right, the weekend after the inauguration. So all these people. It was about women, but there were all these people: women, kids, men. Then we see, LGBT. Saying the civil rights movement. People of color had been screaming about this stuff for years. It was only when, quote unquote, white people, and in some ways specifically Jewish people, came and allied with black people, that other people started paying attention. Well, so what I saw in the halls of Congress during these demonstrations, there were all these people using wheelchairs and walkers in the halls of Congress to dare to advocate for, being an activist against the cuts they wanted to make. And you didn't see a lot of people who didn't have disabilities. You didn't see people who were their friends and allies and coworkers, or if there were parents over their children. You didn't see people in the PTA that are supporting that family. Why? Because we tend to end up going it alone because we have isolated ourselves. We have done that. And people say, parents will say, oh, Kathie, I don't want my child included in the community until the community is ready. The community is ready right now. The reason you don't see a lot of kids with disabilities in community activities, for example, is not that they're not welcome. I mean, Charmaine, you and I had the personal experience that a lot of what our kids did in Woodland Park, this little bitty town we lived in Colorado, Dylan was the first, Benjamin was the first, the first two with the disability to do things. You and I didn't do that because we were trying to blaze a trail. We did it because that's what our kids wanted to do. And then people would say, well, we've never done that before. And I would look at them and say, neither have we. We'll learn to do it together, okay? As opposed to getting our backs up and saying, well, I'm going to sue you, or I'm going to take you to, da, 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 da. And so we have kind of chosen to isolate ourselves so that, back to the point you're making, Charmaine, is that when we want these big changes, we don't have people. If you think about, say, in the LGBTQ thing, for example, maybe they go march and they have their families and their co-workers and their neighbors marching with them. Well, if you look at adults with disabilities today are not employed, we have an estimated 75 to 90% unemployment rate. So people with disabilities are not working in a mall, or they're not working in a bank building. So they don't have friends that are co-workers. They're living in group homes. So they're only surrounded by other adults with disabilities. So they're not living in an apartment complex by themselves with support, whatever support they need, so that they're meeting their neighbors who do not have disabilities, who can go and march with them. So yeah, absolutely, Charmaine, we have isolated ourselves into these little niches, and so we're the only ones that come out and support each other. So therefore, then people think, oh, well, that's not important. It's just that small group of people. But we know that disability affects everybody. I mean, that's one thing that Ed Roberts preached about, that you can be born with a disability, you can acquire disability through an accident or illness, or if you live long enough, you'll acquire disability through the aging process. And he made the point that people with disabilities make up the largest minority group of any group in the country, or in the world for that matter, and that it is the only minority group that is totally inclusive, right? I mean, I cannot go join the minority group of, people of color. I can't join this other group, but anybody can, people with disabilities represent all gender, socioeconomic, genetic stuff, religion, ethnicity, everything. And so when were we going to reach out and help other people come into our world and let them know that, oh, our kids are just like your kids, and we don't want a special needs PTA, we don't want this, we don't want that. We want regular, we want ordinary. But until we get out of our little bubble, and I call it disability world, too many of us are living in disability world, and we need to get out in the real world.
Oh, exactly. And I look at ways that we can impact the whole education system, because we can't keep trying to, recreate and retrofit, and make our education system work for all. And I look at all the other marginalized students in every classroom. And so this is a bigger issue. It's an education issue. It's not a special education issue. Right. And until we, gather, community people that support this, and other teachers and other parents of kids that don't have disabilities, and until they see us willing to work for something that's for the good of all, right, versus only being concerned about certain things for our own kids, that's when we start building that community and building that trust with each other.
Well, I think that we've become, and I don't mean to criticize parents for this, because it's a behavior that we have learned, but when our children, especially if they're diagnosed very early, and we're referred to early intervention. And I know, everything I hope the parents don't do, it's because I've done it and you've done it. We both done it. It's like, well, you don't know what you don't know. If I knew then what I know now, I would have done things differently. That's part of being a human being, and learning and growing, hopefully. But we have been trained as parents, early intervention, they come to your door and boy, they explain to you your rights and your child's rights. And your child has all these entitlements and these benefits. And So then we get what I call, and I've got an article on this called the entitlement mentality. So we get embedded to that entitlement mentality, and so then we think, well, people owe us, And some parents, in the first edition of my book, I I described all these different types of parents, and I thought I better take that out. And then later, I think in another edition I'm going to put it back in. But there's one category of parents that I talked about. People that there are some parents, usually moms, are angry. They're angry that they got this kid. So by God, somebody's going to pay for this. And then there's other parents who feel incompetent. I mean, if you just think about the whole idea of early intervention, professionals that you don't even know coming into your house and telling you how to take care of your baby if it has a disability. And it's like I realized, no, I get better wisdom from other parents, because most people that work in early intervention don't have a child with a disability. I mean, they might have a lot of college education, but they don't have the personal experience. Not that they can't be helpful sometimes, but it's not the same. But anyway, so we get this entitlement mentality, and then we think, well, we need this money, we need this service, we need this whatever. So we're always advocating for those things instead of advocating for inclusion. That years ago, when we were still in Colorado, Charmaine, you and I both, and you remember there was a dad. I can't think of his name. Well, I don't want to mention it anyway because I don't have his permission. But he was a dad, and at the time he was the big cheese in early intervention for the state of Colorado. And we were talking on the phone one day, and he said, Kathie, I'm in Colorado all the time. He says, I know you are always out presenting across the country. And he says, tell me if you see this in other states or if I'm only seeing it in Colorado. He said, but what I see here in Colorado is that parents, and again, this was early intervention, he says parents are way more, concerned about getting services than about their kids being included. And he said, do you see that? And I said, absolutely. So we have sort of been brainwashed. I'll just use that word. We've sort of been brainwashed into thinking the most important thing about our kids is to get them to be normal. Again, nobody comes out and says that verbatim, but that's why we're doing all these things to get our kids to be quote unquote normal. Well, then if they never reach, normalcy, whatever that is, then we are still left to believe, well, our kids still don't belong. Because we sort of set up this paradigm that you can only belong, you can only be included, you can only live an ordinary life if you are normal. So we're on this mystical, never-ending road that we never reach. And then we wonder, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that, I get, and you and I, Charmaine, I really do get emotional about it. That we wonder why so many adults are not successful. Because we have not prepared them to live in the real world. We haven't given them the education they need. We haven't taught others that, here's Benjamin, and sometimes he still drools, and now he's got a beard, and so it hangs off his beard, and it's that's kind of gross, but if Benjamin, it's okay, Benjamin, wipe your chin, it's not a big deal. I mean, he's, in his early 30s now. He's still going to do that. So get used to it. And he still eats kind of funny. He doesn't do well with a lot of silverware. It's well, if you don't like the way Benjamin eats, don't look at him. I don't like the way you eat. You don't have a disability, and you're kind of a yucky eater too. But the point is that until we take our places out in the community, that's why Benjamin wrote an article that I put it on my website. It's called The Call to Action. And because he got really upset, with the place we were eating, and the server, Benjamin was, I don't know, 25 years old. Kept coming over and asking me what he wanted and what would he like to eat. I said, I don't know, you have to ask him. Oh. And she wouldn't hardly look at him. Well, what do you want? And he's like, well, I want chicken tenders. I mean, that's all he ever gets. Chicken tenders and French fries. And then, would he like some more iced tea? I don't know. You're going to have to ask him. I mean, how stupid is this woman? It's look at him, ask him. Now, some kids don't communicate. Well, then you wait for their communication device. Okay. And so Benjamin said, Mom, why does she keep doing that? Why is she so stupid? And I said, because Benjamin, there aren't very many people with disabilities that are out doing stuff in the world. And I said, until they are, she's going to keep making the same mistake. So Benjamin got mad and he said, why aren't more people with disabilities out there? I said, I don't know, Benjamin, why don't you write an article? And so he wrote this article, and the message was to people with disabilities and families, get out there in the real world. And that's the only way that things are going to change. When we take our place, we cannot wait. The world is not going to change without us taking our places and people realizing, It is as normal to have a disability as to not have one. It is as normal for somebody to be born with Down.
I think you froze, Kathie. I think Kathie froze. So let me type her a message here. I think you froze, Kathie. Technology. So we'll see. She might have to let me type her another message to maybe refresh. Refresh, Kathie. So while Kathie's doing that, I wanted to bring up a comment from Angela, actually a couple comments. So let's go back here. So Angela had said that I just wish that there would be more training for general ed teachers in special education. And I guess what I would like to see, Angela, is that we have more training for universal design for learning, because I think as long as we keep kind of having those two separate things as far as, you know, regular general education versus special education, and we have different certifications and we have, you know, different parallel tracks of training, that we're going to still maintain that dual system. So to me, if colleges would teach all teachers the concepts of universal design for learning, then we will have more kids included. More teachers will have the skills and the background to include students. So let me know what you think about that. Okay, I'm back on. I think the internet gods are playing with this. So I'm going to see if Kathie's going to be able to get herself back up here. The other thing that, yes, and so Angela says, yes, UDL is more of what I was meaning. Absolutely. Okay, so Kristen has a great question. And Kristen, I'm going to put your question up here. And give everybody a moment to read that. So let me see if I can text Kathie. So I'm going to text her and see if she can refresh. Let me see if she is back. I don't see it. Let me read your question, Kristen. So it says, Kathie, you emailed me back and encouraged me when my son was 2 and rejected from church preschool to not ask next time and to work it out. Great. I never asked again. Thank you. My son is fully included everywhere except school forces him out into the not so special room for math and reading. The special ed room has done nothing but widen the achievement gap and decrease his opportunity to learn all the hundreds of things other kids are learning. We have an IEP meeting tomorrow. We want him fully included. We never agreed to have him out. His special ed director said, we can let's see. I don't, if you mean no, we can no longer just let kids of color. We are charged with actually teaching him when we suggested modifications such as a calculator or taking photos during science, etc. Any help? My question may not be clear, but any last minute help is appreciated. So, yeah, that kind of. So, Kristen, I'm like bummed because this is a great question for Kathie, and now she has disappeared from our our show. So let me look over here and see if she's waiting, and I just don't see her. I went all back and restarting her computer. Okay, so she might be with us in a minute. And so, Kristen, I know I've talked to you, and you're in our Parent Advocate Trailblazer group, and it is so frustrating that a lot of special ed teachers and administrators still have this faulty, still believe this myth that something magical and special happens in the special ed room. And they don't realize what really happens is our kids are missing out on that rich environment in the general ed classroom. So no matter how many research articles we can show with people, no matter how many videos or podcasts we can share with people, sometimes they are just like so stuck in their position that segregation, pull-out services are the way to go. And it can be so challenging to figure out exactly why they are so stuck in that position. I think one of the big reasons that we see with many staff is it's based on fear. Fear that they won't be able to do a good job as a teacher if they have students with significant disabilities in their classroom. They have bought into this, I'm not special, I'm not a special ed teacher, I don't have the training. They don't realize that good teaching is good teaching. And they do have enormous skills that they have been using with other students that will probably be effective also with students with disabilities. And if they don't, one of the things that I remind parents of is in your IEP, you can write in training for staff that's for teachers, for paras, so they actually will have the skills that they need. If they don't understand universal design of learning, if they don't understand how to present material in a variety of ways, how to give kids choices of how they show what they've learned, if they don't have high expectations or know how to presume competence, some of that can actually be done through training. And I'm not just talking about sending them to a conference. I'm talking about giving them the knowledge, but then we have to have other teachers be peer models, peer coaches, because research has shown us that if we only send people to conferences, if we only give them an article to read, 0% of that gets implemented in the classroom. So when we're looking at training and writing that in the IEP, one of the things that I tell parents is we really need to be specific. How often is that training going to occur? Who's going to provide it? And I see Kathie back. Let me bring her up. And also the whole concept of making sure that we have peer coaching so teachers can start utilizing things like universal design for learning. So Kathie, welcome back. Oops, now she left again. Oh no. Oh. So just when I thought she was going to be able to respond to you, Kristen, she left. So I will show you Lissa's comment here. Let me put this down. Let me see if she came back again. It's the mystery of technology, right? So here's Lissa. Let me show you your comment. And I'm going to read this because people listening to the podcast won't be able to see it. But Lissa says, this is a hard subject for me. I'm forever grateful for the early intervention services that my son has received and the therapies that I took him to when he was just a toddler, like OT, PT services, and yes, sometimes grueling and a lot of hard work. My son spent 2 years learning to ride a bicycle, but without the therapy he received, I honestly don't think he would have ever learned it. He loves riding his bike now. My son was mute and did not talk until he was over 4 years old. With the help of therapy, he talks up a storm now. I don't understand the concept of that letting a child with a disability just be when greatly improving the quality of his for him is achievable. So, Lissa, I'm going to check and see if Kathie is with us. I don't know. Maybe I should, let me see if she's saying, so I'm going to text her and say, try again. And I'll respond, Lissa. I don't, presume that everything I'm going to say is exactly what Kathie would say. So I'm hoping she'll get back here with us. I think some of what Kathie's points are is to look first at natural environments and how our kids can learn things in natural environments. I think as much as possible, we want to give our kids the support that they need. But I think that one of the points that Kathie often makes when she speaks is, not that therapists are bad people, but oftentimes when we look at, starting that mentality that something is wrong with our kids and they need to be fixed. And so I want to wait when Kathie comes back on because I think she'll be able to kind of explain her point of view a lot better than I can. But for some reason, her computer is shutting down and she's trying again to get back up. And so Lissa also says, however, I allowed my son to play basketball with other peers in his class. He loved it, and the other children encompassed him, and it was a wonderful learning experience for him. Yeah. And I think, we know, Lissa, that, as parents, we have the most intimate knowledge of our kids, and that's the part that sometimes we don't allow ourselves to trust and to try. I think when I was talking about teachers being fearful that they won't be successful if kids with disabilities are included in their class, I think that also comes with being a parent, that we can be fearful of our kids being made fun of, teased and bullied. And so it's safer to keep them in separate situations. And I think what we learn is that, like Kathie said, our kids then start living in this disability world instead of being in the real world, and the impact that can have on our kids' lives. So it is a topic that, has so many aspects to it. But one of the things I was excited about is that Kathie would be with us, and her computer is not cooperating. So I hope you'll hang in with us because I'm sure she'll be back. And let's see if I'm going to scroll back down and see. Yeah. And so Angela had this comment. She says, unfortunately, parents hold their children back out of fear. Give them the dignity of risk. All children need to fail and learn from it. Yeah, and I think that's a huge concept for us because we do want to, as parents, have this natural tendency to make sure our kids are safe. And then sometimes we take that too far and we don't allow our kids to make mistakes and to learn from it. And we're too quick to offer help, or we're too quick to correct something instead of having our children figuring it out. So just as we do with our kids that do not have disabilities, we need to allow our kids with disabilities to fail, to make mistakes, because we know, right? That's how we all learn so much. And I keep looking over here and scrolling, hoping, okay, now I see Kathie back.
That is a weird, I had my computer not hooked up to power, but I had power. I mean, I had enough battery power, and the whole thing just went black. And it's like, not like the screen, I mean, my entire screen. It's like, what? And so I restarted it, my MacBook Air, that's not that old. And I started reloading everything again, and it went black again. And it changed my clock and my calendar. I thought, okay, this is a major system failure. So I plugged it back into power, and now everything seems okay. So I don't know. I am so sorry. I mean, it's like.
Well, no, I'm sorry because I was trying to answer things from Kathie's point of view. And it's like, I don't.
Great.
So let me bring up a question from Kristen. She's in Ohio, and she said that she emailed you back a long time ago, and that you had encouraged her when her son was 2 and rejected from church preschool to not ask next time, and it worked out great. She said, I never asked again. Thank you. My son is fully included everywhere except school, and that they force him out of and into that not so special room for math and reading, and that the special ed room has done nothing but widen the achievement gap and decrease his opportunity to learn all the hundreds of things other kids are learning. We have an IEP meeting tomorrow. We want him fully included. We never agreed to have him out. His special ed director said we can no longer, and I forget, she corrected this, separate maybe kids with color. We are changed with actually teaching him when we suggested modifications, such as a calculator, taking photos during science. But any help, my question may not be clear, but any last minute help is appreciated.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. Thank you, Kristen, for sharing that. And then please feel free to email me again. I know that Charmaine's always a big help to so many parents too, and I'm always try to do my best to help by just sending a contact us on our website, disabilitiesnatural.com. But I would say that Kristen, I would say to go back to your whole thing about not asking. I mean, we need to presume inclusion. We need to presume competence. That's one of the posters that we sell too, that we got to presume competence. But I think if we presume inclusion, so you've absolutely done the right thing of not asking. What happens in public school, though, is that we allow ourselves to be put in the position of trying to, we essentially fall into the trap of listening to their argument. We try to convince them why our children should be included, as opposed to we need to put them in the position, you explain to me why my child should not be included. In other words, we take their argument. So now they're like, oh no, your child needs to be over here. And I love what you said, the not so special room. Because like, yeah, what is so special about special education? Nothing. But there was, I'm trying to think of the name of the article because I wrote an article specifically about this. Oh, and I can't. I'll think of the name as soon as we're done, and then I'll email it to Charmaine, and she can take. Because I forget what I name my articles. But the point of the article was a mom who had a similar situation, and I said she wanted me to send her some data. She said, Kathie, I'm sure you have resources. Can you send me some data to prove such and such? And I said, why are you even going down that path? I said, why? I said, the fact that you want data to prove your position. I said, you are engaging in their argument, which validates their argument. I mean, does that make sense? This kind of gets esoteric, but it's like, I mean, that would be like saying if your 2-year-old, wants to play in the street, you don't say, well, no, you can't play in the street because there are cars. He's a 2-year-old. You just say no. If you engaged in a discussion with a 2-year-old about then you're validating that the kid has got a good point to make. And it's like, no, we should not allow ourselves to be caught up into. And so now, having said this, it's not so easy to explain in a real short period of time, and I would probably need to get with Kristen to like role play this, in some ways, but we essentially need to say what, and we always, let me back up. Despite what I'm saying, I don't believe in arguing with people because we can't win an argument. I mean, so the point is that you have to try a different tactic. So whenever they say, oh no, your child needs to be here, then you say, I understand that in most cases, or the way the school is always done under, in other words, yeah, okay, I understand. Or I understand you've never done this before, okay? And then you get into negotiating, because we have to stop seeing ourselves as advocates. I mean, I know that that's the word we use all the time, but I like the word activist better, because if you look up the word advocate in a dictionary, it says to plead on behalf of. And it's like, really? I want to go be pleading on behalf of my son? It's like, no, again, we don't want special, we want equal, okay? So we need to see ourselves as negotiators, and when we negotiate, then we see ourselves as having parity. We are equal to those we're negotiating with. And so you get into negotiating and you say, I know that in the past the school's always done this way, or blah, blah, blah. What would it take for, my child to be whatever, okay? What would it take for my child to be in the general ed classroom with supports and accommodations? Now, they cannot tell you yes or no, because that'd be grammatically incorrect. I mean, that sounds stupid. So they have to say something. The point is that we want to keep them talking. So they say, well, it would take, our teachers would have to be trained, and we don't have the money for that. Or, oh, I understand. Okay, well then, if the teacher needs training, excuse me, I can come in and do some training, or I have a friend, or whatever it is, we have to have the solutions ready at hand, okay? We need to know what are the barriers. To that end, and I moved my position so I don't have my pretty background behind me. I got to get my tea because my throat. So give me 1 second here, 1 second. One of the things that I talk about in one of my books is that we need to know. Say, I'm just going to make up a scenario that I did in my book. You want your 4th grade, son or daughter, let's say son, to be in the 4th grade general ed class, and your son's not reading at grade level. Whatever disability the kid has, maybe he's not walking, talking, whatever, it doesn't matter. And they're going to say, oh, there's no way. There's no way. I mean, these are 9 or 19-year-old kids. Your child's not anything like, a 4th grader. He could never do that. The reason that we kind of get, hornswoggled in some ways is that we don't know what that 4th grade classroom looks like. And so they can kind of beat us. They can beat us. Well, there's no way your child could beat her. So we need to have an image of what that 4th grade classroom looks like. And if that means that we have older kids, that we remember, okay, what was 4th grade like? Or you get in the classroom and to observe, not so that you can sit there and say, oh yeah, my child could never do this, but say, okay, if it were my son Benjamin, okay, how would Benjamin in the 4th grade do X? What accommodations would Benjamin need? What if I see him in here, what would it take for him to be successful? What would it take for the teacher to be successful? So that then when we had the IP meeting, and they said, oh no, your child could never make it in the 4th grade. Oh yes, well, but in the 4th grade, what I noticed was that the students have this kind of book, have this, then you've got some answers, and you're not going to have all the answers. But we go into these meetings really, and again, I don't like to use the whole fighting, mentality, because that's just, I don't think that's real healthy for any of us. But we don't go in there we go in there thinking we've got the law on our side. Well, the law says this. Well, they'll say, fine, sue us. We got more lawyers than you do, and we know that. And that, I mean, some schools deserve to be, sue the pants off of them, but that doesn't usually get us the outcome. And I always want us to focus on outcomes. And so, what outcome is going to get you the success that you want for your child? So the more information that we have, because we kind of go in these meetings with we don't have the information that we need. We don't need to know more about the law. I mean, and what Charmaine said a minute ago, I was finally getting back on, is that, yeah, a good teacher is a good teacher is a good teacher. And you don't have to be a specialist and know how to teach a child with a disability. I mean, and this is one argument that I always make when, I'll have educators say to me, and I go present somewhere, they'll say, oh, Kathie, no, we weren't We weren't trained, we weren't trained to teach those kids. And I look at them and I'll say, there could be a room full of, general ed teachers, and I'll say, so what? I said, you guys think I had a PhD in cerebral palsy and that's why I got my son? Really? What did I know about it? What did Mark know about it? My husband? We didn't know anything. And, Benjamin survived. He's doing well. And quite frankly, as a young adult, and I know Charmaine would say the same thing about her son, Dylan, we keep learning from Benjamin. We keep screwing things up, okay? Mark and I are very imperfect parents, and we do the best we can. So the point you have to tell teachers is, you can teach my child. I trust you. I know that my child can be successful in your classroom. I have to tell some of Benjamin's teachers that. I know you've never had a kid like Benjamin before. I know you've never had to deal with this and that and the other and his assistive technology and his accommodations. But I know my son can learn from you. I know you're a good teacher. Now, we might want to, put our hands around their necks and strangle them sometimes. But, we've got to have the trust. Sometimes they're not worthy of our trust. But, I get emotional about this too. But it's like, this is our children's lives at stake. So this is not about our ego. We got to get our egos out of there. If you have to be an Academy Award-winning actress and suck up to them all day long in order to get what your kid wants, then do it. Because it's not about you and it's not about them. It's about your child and his education. And our children only have one childhood. They only have one. And every single day that goes by that they're not living the life of their dreams is a day that's, not a good day. And so, again, if you have to bake cookies all the time, and if you have to, one mom said, if I bake cookies, I'd put poison in them. And I was like, okay, that'll really generate a great outcome, wouldn't it? And so, Charmaine and I both had to do this when our kids were younger. I have a good friend who's a mentor in another state. She doesn't have kids, but she's in the disability field, and she works at the state level, and she gets stuff done. And she taught me years ago. She said, Kathie, she said, if I've got to kiss, can I say this, Charmaine, on your show?
Yes.
If I've got to kiss their ass, I'll kiss their asses. If I got to kiss their ass to get what I want on behalf of people as good as I will. And then she had a little funny look on her face, and she said, and Kathie, always remember, no butt too big, no lips too small. So there are some people who have really small lips, and other people have really big butts. So we have to make accommodation. Okay, I need to stop talking because I think more questions. And I don't know, if there's, screw up in the middle. But
I do want to pull up Lissa's question. This is one that came when you were offline, but
I was indisposed.
I know. Lissa is from Idaho, and she is a wonderful mom. And she had a question when we were talking about therapies and early childhood, intervention. She said, this is a hard subject for me. I'm forever grateful for all the early intervention services that my son has received in the therapies that I took him to when he was just a toddler, like OT, PT services. And yes, sometimes grueling and a lot of hard work. My son spent 2 years learning to ride a bicycle, but without the therapy he received, I honestly don't think he would have ever learned it. He loves riding his bike now. My son was mute and did not talk until he was over 4 years old. With the help of therapy, he talks up a storm now. I don't understand the concept that letting a child with a disability just be, when greatly improving the quality of life for him, is achievable.
Okay, is it Lissa or Lisa? I'm not sure.
It's Lissa.
Lissa. Okay, thank you, Lissa, for that question. That's a good question. And probably had I not gotten knocked off or knocked myself off, whatever I did, we would have gotten to this. When people hear me say stuff about therapy, they misconstrue to mean that we don't give kids any help. Or to quote her, we just let them be. No, I'm not saying that at all. And we didn't get into that part yet. And so I'm glad that you brought that up. Listen, thank you for doing that. It's not that we don't help kids. We help them. We give them whatever kind of help they want. And it's not that we don't need therapists in our lives. My son had wonderful therapists. What I realized, Benjamin stopped going to therapy at age 6, and that was his decision because he was in tears. And he said, Mom, going to therapy doesn't make me feel like a regular person, because he knew that other kids didn't go. He knew that he was missing out on all kinds of parts of life because of that. So it's not that we don't help kids. I don't mean that in contrast to what Lissa said, it's not that we just let them be. No, we give them all the help that we need. We need therapists as consultants, teach us as parents as child care providers, as teachers, as grandparents, as family members, aunts, whomever, teach us how to incorporate beneficial activities throughout the child's day. And so when Benjamin stopped going to therapy, we didn't stop helping his body, but we did it in a different way. And so I said to him, I said, sweetie, you don't have to go to therapy anymore. I mean, I was in tears. He was in tears. I mean, it was a really, eye-opening experience. And some parents say, well, my kid loves going to therapy. Well, yeah, I mean, Benjamin did up to a point. Okay. I mean, because what kid doesn't like a lot of one-on-one attention? I mean, that's just the nature of being a kid. Other kids don't, and they let their parents know that they're unhappy by crying or, misbehaving or acting up or whatever. But so I'm not saying that we don't help our kids, that we give them whatever help that they need in a different way, because ultimately, and this was much too long an answer, but it was whenever I got to know adults with disabilities when my son was very young, that adults with disabilities talked to me about what it felt like to be taken to therapy all your life, and to never be able to do what your parents wanted you to do. For example, to walk or talk or behave or whatever the therapy was for. And they would say, Kathie, I think I'm a big disappointment to my mom and dad. I could never do what they wanted me to do. Okay. And that was like eye-opening, to feel like you're a failure all of your life. So as far as like stuff like riding the bike, that's wonderful. Okay. Here's part two. Listen, we don't know. I mean, we assume a cause and effect relationship. Oh, the child can't do this. The child is going to therapy, and now the child is doing that. So we automatically assume, we think we know, oh, it's a cause and effect. Now the child's doing this because he's going to therapy. We don't know that. We don't know but what the child would have done it anyway. Okay, or maybe he'd done it a little bit later or done it a little bit different way. We don't know that. So that, for example, the therapist worked for years to get Benjamin to crawl. I mean, to crawl. Benjamin could not crawl. He could drag himself on his elbows, on his belly. And when he was in first grade, I was talking to all his teachers one day. We had a big meeting with assistant teachers, and Charmaine will remember this. And it was Super Bowl Sunday, and Benjamin had been laying on the floor at home, and Mark and I were screaming at the television, and Emily was playing with her Barbie doll doing something. And Benjamin was on the floor, and he was going, look at me, look at me, look at me. We looked at him. Benjamin was up on all fours crawling. And I was like, oh, my God. And I was telling all his teachers. And I said, Benjamin crawled over the week. I mean, then his arms and legs went screwy, and he didn't do it anymore. And so I said, and he had stopped going to therapy by then. And I said, you guys wouldn't believe Benjamin crawled over the weekend, and everybody goes, oh my gosh, because I, told all his teachers he doesn't do this, he doesn't do that. And Marge, the 60-something-year-old, PE teacher said, what's the big deal? And I said, well, he's never crawled before in his life. I said, therapist been years. And she said, well, he's been crawling in gym for the past 6 months or whatever. I said, what? I said, Marge, how did you get him to crawl? She said, I didn't know he couldn't. She was having his first grade class, inclusive education class, pair up in the gym, and they had to have a ball between them and crawl to each other. And then she got him out of his wheelchair, laid him on the floor, laying on his belly. She blew the whistle and made him crawl. So we say, well, they're only doing it because of therapy? No, they do a lot of stuff because they see their peers doing it. Okay. So again, listen, that's a great question. I want people to understand. I'm not saying we don't help kids, but we help them in different ways. So that we help Benjamin do some of the same things that therapists did, but we didn't do it in the form of therapy. Okay, does that make sense? We have to talk about this longer, but there's stuff on my website and my book about it too. So.
Yeah, and speaking of, and so Lisa said, thanks for clarifying that. And Kimberly has joined us, and she said, oh, I can't wait to hear the replay. I wish I could have tuned in sooner. And yes, the replay is available right after our live goes off the air. But I do want to talk to people because I'm going to be giving away a couple of Applebite books to people. So Kathie, if you can, I know you had your book there, if you want to grab it. And what I love is Kathie has a variety of ways to help you learn.
The book, the Applebites book.
Yeah, so do you want to talk about that for a minute?
Well, this is my big book. This is Disability Natural, really big. And this is the third edition. First edition was a smaller format, but it's very text dense. And so this one, I thought I made it. So it has some white space, it has some activities to do. And some people said, oh, Kathie, I'll never read a book that big. I don't have time to read. Charmaine and I were talking to people. Nobody wants to read. They just want to tweet and that kind of stuff. So I said, okay, fine. I'll write a little book. So this little book, And so this is, and I tell people it's like 44 pages. There's one idea per page. And I say you don't even have to read it. Just look at the graphics, okay? Has big text, you know. And so one mom one year bought like 10 of these. This is sells for $10. And she bought 10 of them and gave one to every member of her child's IEP team and said, read all the, everybody read this before the IEP meeting. And this is how we're going to do things differently. So there's a lot of different different concepts. I mean, they're all different concepts. We're not going to talk about developmental age, chronological age. We're not going to talk about spatial needs. We're going to do this and not that. And so that's what those books are about. And then the other one, the big book, what I call it, the big book, it's just called Revolutionary Common Sense for Raising Successful Children with Disabilities. And it's from birth into young adulthood. So it's about everything, about inclusion in school, about inclusion in the community, about alternatives to therapy, alternatives to early intervention, alternatives to a lot of stuff. Because, I mean, you all know Albert Einstein's definition of insanity. Doing the same things over and over again, expecting a different result. Well, we keep doing the same things, I mean, and if we go back to Lissa's example for a second, adults with disabilities have been getting therapy all their lives. They're now, 25, 35, 45 years old. They still have disabilities, okay? So it's like, what message are we sending that the message that they get from, traditional therapies is you're not okay the way you are. We want you to be this way. We don't want you to be the way you are. And so one of my messages, and there's an article on this on the website called Hearts and Minds, that we spend an awful lot of time and energy focused on people's bodies and their brains. And in the process, we can cause great harm to their hearts and minds, permanent harm. And I think we need to spend a whole lot more time focused on people's hearts and minds, that they are loved, that they are valued just the way they are, that they do not have to be quote unquote normal or perfect, or I mean, there's no such thing anyway. And so that our kids love themselves just the way they are. They need to love themselves just the way they are, whether they can ride a bike or walk or talk or wipe their own behind or, feed themselves. Those things are irrelevant. I mean, in the big scheme of those things are irrelevant. Okay. So, that's my hope, that we got to focus on people's hearts and minds. And so that's what my stuff is about. And again, that really just goes back to changing attitudes. I mean, it all starts up here. It's not about them. It's about us and what's up here. So.
Oh, exactly. And I just think that, you help so many of us push our thinking and look at things from another perspective. And so I'm going to be so excited because we'll be giving away a couple of Kathie's Apple Bite book. And what we'll be doing is today after the show, I'll post a question on my Visions and Voices Together Facebook page. If you answer the question and there's no right or wrong answer, you'll be entered into the giveaway. Ooh. And we'll do another question Friday and Saturday. And so you get more chances. And on Sunday, I'll have Siri draw the winning number. But I also want to encourage people to go to Kathie's website because she has just a wealth of information. Over 200 articles, I think, Kathie, that you've written?
And they're categorized. You go to the Learn tab, and I have them, families and children, strategies, different things. And there's a lot about people first language and a lot about inclusive education. And then under the Learn tab, if you go to the library, like if you're just looking for one particular article, there's the library, has them in alphabetical order. But then on other pages, there's a description so that it kind of tells you what the article is about. And so, as Charmaine said, there's probably close to 300 articles. Okay. If you printed them all, you would have a great big book that you are welcome to make copies of them and share with your family members or your child's teachers or therapist, or if you're a teacher, to share with parents or, whatever. So I'd appreciate people sharing them with other people because, I don't do Facebook. I know I'm bad. I'm a Luddite. I mean, call me. I don't have the time. I don't have the energy. I mean, I'm wonderful. I'm glad that Charmaine's doing it, but it's all I can do to manage the website. And I'm a one-woman band and going out of town to do presentations and writing books and making our products. And so also we have a little online store that has the books, and we sell bookmarks and badges and posters. And we get a lot of orders from schools for like people first language bookmarks of, how to I mean, children are the best teachers. And so if children learn whenever they're in school about inclusive education and they learn to use people first language, then they go home and teach their parents, and then we can start making some progress, you know?
Oh, exactly. Um, And so I really encourage you to check out her website. I'm also in our show notes. I'll be giving you some links to some articles that we specifically addressed today. But know there are a ton of other articles that I'm sure you will find really helpful. So, Kathie, thank you so much for being with us and jumping on to Facebook. So you can reach more people. And I just really encourage our viewers to share the video, because I know there are other friends and teachers and parents that would love to hear this message, and it would resonate with them. Give them that courage to keep on keeping on, because we know, right? We have to still do a lot of work.
Yes.
And
I remember, Charmaine, excuse me, I remember the name of the article that I was talking about earlier before I was indisposed. I don't know what happened there. It was which should be defended, inclusion or segregation.
Oh, good.
That was an article about that we end up defending our child's right to be included, and we need to force them to defend why our child is segregated. So that's that article that goes into more detail that, you know.
And so this is exactly the kind of paradigm shifts that Kathie helps us look at. So Kathie has always been a best friend of mine. Dylan considers her his mom. And she, you know, even late at night when we're sitting at Wendy's in Woodland Park, Colorado, kind of forlorn about different things, Kathie would help me look at the situation in another way and encouraged me to keep on keeping on with, you know, speaking up for Dylan and making sure that he was included all the way through school. So Kathie has been a blessing to our family in many ways. And I know she has also been that for families around the country. So Kathie, you have made such a difference, and I just hope that you keep pursuing what you're doing. I know she's also pursuing yard work and all kinds of remodeling and everything else. But and that's the other thing you can see on her website is her calendar where she'll be speaking, and that would also be.
I haven't updated it in a couple of months, so I'll try to get on there and do that.
I know this will be your motivation to do that.
Yes. And she said I have to go do it now. So
I know. Well, thank you,
Charmaine. Thank you. It is such a delight to be with you again. Even though we're miles apart, I feel like we're just right here. So you know, we're back to being at Wendy's.
I know. I know. And I want to remind people that next week we have Courtney Hanson. She is a parent that lives in Tacoma, Washington. She's going to be our guest. She is also a disability activist, and she has kind of the ninja skills of working with state legislators and looking at how we can use that avenue to create more inclusive education. She's working on a bill now in the state of Washington for inclusive preschools versus segregated special ed classrooms for early childhood or preschool kids. So if that's a topic that you're interested in as far as connecting with legislators and making a difference on that political level, make sure you tune in next Thursday at noon Mountain Time, and Courtney Hanson will be here as our guest. So, Kathie, you have given us so many wonderful words and quotes today, but do you have any closing thoughts before we sign off here?
Yeah, a whole lot. So I won't take too much time. I think if we just need to believe in our kids, and I know that all parents love their kids and all parents believe in their kids, but I think that we have to really have those big dreams. And I just will kind of close with this. I met a mom one time when I was doing a presentation that she had two daughters, and at the time I met her, like her older daughter was 6 and her younger daughter was 4, and her younger daughter had autism. And she heard me speak. And there are a lot of parents, that say, no, you don't know what you're talking about. And, well, but my kid has this and your kid has this and they're not the same. So what doesn't apply to my kid? And she came up to me afterwards and she actually had written me a note. And she said, she handed me the note and I had time to read it. I said, can I read it right now? And she goes, yeah. She wrote it because she thought she was going to tear up too much. But she thanked me and she said that when her older daughter was born, they started the college fund for her. And then whenever their daughter with autism was born, of course, they didn't know at birth she had autism, they started a college fund for her. And when she was diagnosed with autism at age 2, they stopped it because they thought our daughter will never go to college, will never have a life. And so she, with tears in her eyes, and I'm getting tears remembering it, she said, I'm going to go home and tell my husband we got to start that college fund up again. And so I think that's the kind of attitude that we have to have, that we cannot keep letting professionals, even other family members, teachers, therapists, squash the hopes for our kids, that we need to have the same hopes and dreams for them that we had before we knew the diagnosis, that we need to have those big dreams and know that our children are perfect just the way they are, and that what the way their lives might be are not exactly the lives that maybe we anticipated. But really, if you have more than one kid, you know that that's true for a child who doesn't have a disability. That they're not always exactly what we planned. But we just again want those ordinary but precious relationships and opportunities that everybody else takes for granted. That our kids have friends, that they're involved in doing whatever they want. They don't have to be social butterflies. Nobody in our family is a social butterfly. We don't do that much, but we do what we want. So all of our kids are precious. And again, they only have one childhood. They only have one. And so we've got to make every moment count. We need to remember that every single day we are making memories. And that's what touched me so much about the adults with disabilities I met, that their memories, and for the most part, and these are adults then when my son was young, and these are adults even today. I mean, so all these years have passed, and this is where I'm sad that we haven't made the progress, that their memories are of therapy. Their memories are of being segregated. Their memories are of riding on the special ed bus or getting teased, or those are their memories, as opposed to their memories of, going on this great vacation or having friends or having a sleepover or those kinds of things. So we, if nothing else, we just are driven by the idea that the rest of today, we're making memories for our kids. Tomorrow, we're making new memories. The next day, we're making new memories. What will our legacy be with our children as far as the memories that they have? And I know we can all do better. And I know that I can do better. I mean, Mark and I, again, Mark and I have to keep doing better every day. So thank you, man, and thank you. Thanks to everybody who watches this. And even if you don't like some of what I say, you can throw something at your computer screen if you want to. Don't break it, like I almost did with my computer, whatever I did. But email me. I mean, I'll be happy to. People sometimes people hear what they think. They think I said this, but I actually didn't. And sometimes it's good to clarify, or else I can say, yes, I did mean this, and this is why. So you are welcome to write to me. I don't always answer immediately because it's just me, and I don't have it. People say, well, would you get this message to Kathie? And it's like, do you think I have an assistant? It's like, I think I want to write back and say, Kathie's really busy. She doesn't have time to talk to you right now. It's like, no, it's just me. So anyway, but I will write you back, and Charmaine knows that. So
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathie. And we are here every Thursday live at noon Mountain Time. I am Charmaine Tanner. I welcome you to join us each week. And remember to share this video and to come back and ask more questions, because we want to keep the conversation going. So thank you, Kathie. Thank you for all our viewers, and we shall see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.